In this section, we are going to talk about deciding which version you are going to use. Are you going to use a digital or a paper employee handbook? As this quote says, don't be afraid to give up the good and go for the great. In other words, what you're using now may be okay and it may be working, but it doesn't mean that it can't be better. Whether it's your decision to make or not, realize that making the decision about which handbook to use is the first step. Understand that you're giving up on an old way of doing things. Either you have no employee handbook or you're using a paper version and you're moving towards something new, a digital version. So, how do you make your new way of handling your employee handbook a great way? You get it all properly organized. In this section, we are going to again talk about the pros and cons of having a paper handbook or a digital version and the ways to move from a paper version to a digital version. There are many things to consider as your company decides which version they would like to have for their employee handbook and how they will share it with employees as well as communicate updates and revisions. So let's get started. An employee handbook needs to be a living document. It will change often, and it still must be reflective of the company's mission, vision, culture, and values. If the plan doesn't work, you change the plan, not the goal. Your goal is to develop the best employee handbook that you can for your organization. So let's talk about the pros and cons of each type of handbook one more time: paper or digital or a combination. So let's first review. The pros of using a paper employee handbook are that it is in print and you can access it on site. You can hand it to your employees and collect an acknowledgement of receipt immediately. The cons of using a paper version are pretty clear. The cost can simply be too much. It can be cost prohibitive to print the handbook as well as any and all revisions and updates every time they come available. It can be more difficult to share with employees because it has to be accessible in person or you have the cost of mailing it to others wherever your employees are. Now let's consider the pros and the cons of going digital, either in conjunction with the paper version or as a standalone online version. The pros of using a digital employee handbook are that it is virtually accessible from anywhere. It's less costly to create, to maintain, and to update with revisions. You can make it interactive and searchable with keywords, and you can give access to new employees before their first day of work. The great myth of our times is that technology is communication. Libby Larsen is correct. Just because you provide something does not mean you've actually communicated it. The cons of using a digital employee handbook: not all employees will have access to the web. Also remember that just because you've shared the document online does not mean that you have communicated your expectations with your employees. Not having the one-on-one face-to-face engagement can greatly limit the communication and therefore increase the misunderstandings between you and your employees. Finally, the ways that you're going to present your handbook. You're going to either have your paper in print, your digital online, or a combination of the paper and digital versions. If you decide to go with the paper version and you have a small number of employees, printing it may not be such an issue. The other option is to print several copies and have them available on site for people to come by and review the sections they're interested in reading. Some of the printing decisions will be based on whether your company is going to stay totally paper or transition to a digital version. If you're planning on transitioning to a digital version, you will likely not want to invest in a great number of print copies. If using a digital version only, or even if just some of your information is online, you must determine how your employees will access it. Will they have a special web link with a code or password? How will updates and revisions be shared? Will you email your employees and then have a way to confirm they received the email? These are more of the tedious questions that must be answered and you must be prepared to handle when transitioning to a digital or online employee handbook. Next, we will talk about how to assemble a paper version of an employee handbook. The critical part of this process is in gathering the documents you need and ensuring you have a system in place to make any updates or revisions later. As we have said before, this handbook is a living document, so there will be amendments.